Thomas University in St. Paul, Minnesota on an Air Force ROT ski scholarship. He delayed his active duty to pursue a master's degree in international relations at the Monterey Institute of International Studies in Monterey, California. Although his plan was to fly jets, he was guided into military intelligence career. His military career accumulated as one of President Reagan's daily military intelligence briefer at the White House. After leaving the military, Allen became a sought-after consultant providing business intelligence insights, strategic marketing, and brand strategies to Fortune 500 companies. Recently, he focused on helping credit unions enhance their competitive strategies. He and his wife, Rebecca, moved from Appleton, Wisconsin to Oro Valley 2 years ago to prepare for retirement. They have 3 adult children, 2 grandchildren. Following his presentation of his 9/11 experience, I'm sure he'll be happy to answer any of the questions. It's my great pleasure to introduce Alan this morning.
This is a day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Good morning.
Amen. Amen.
So this morning I'm going to share with you my 9/11 story, as well as its impact and kind of my return to my faith. So that's all part of it. But before we get started, I want you to know this is the first time I've done a presentation of this particular experience that I've had. I shared the story with others, usually around the anniversary of 9/11, bits and pieces. Of course, the committee heard some of those bits and pieces, and they asked if I would be willing to present to you all this morning. So I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Great.
Although it's been 24 years since 9/11, it really feels like it was yesterday for me, having been so close to it and experienced it the way I did. So I apologize in advance if there are portions where I get a little emotional.
It's okay.
It's all part of it.
It's okay.
So another caveat, the pictures that you see in this presentation are stock images. As you probably know, 24 years ago, cell phones didn't have cameras in them. So the images are quite limited in terms of what's available. If a reporter was out and captured some things, or a photographer, that's about all that's available. So I scoured the internet for pictures that were as close to what I actually saw that matched my experience. So I just want you to know they're not pictures that I actually took. I also have a lot of information on some of these slides and notes that I will refer to here and read from. That's so that I don't forget any of the details about that day and that event. I welcome questions at any point in time. Just wave your hand if you want to get my attention. I know there's a lot of information here, and if there's something that doesn't make sense or doesn't seem clear, I'm happy to pause and answer those questions. Of course, at the end, I'm happy to take any questions about either the 9/11 experience or any other part of my career. Next slide, please. Herman did a great job summarizing. I had thrown this slide in, not sure what Herman would say, so he's covered most of this. One thing that he didn't mention, coincidentally, my family and I, we spent 12 years in Madison, Wisconsin. So we churched at Pastor Tim's church in Madison. So I've known Pastor Tim for about 20 years. The other thing that I wanted to mention, Herman mentioned that I grew up in Racine and focus on Kringle. So before we get into the more solid part of this presentation, I thought I'd share maybe a funny little brief story about Kringle. So growing up in Racine, Kringle was just a common thing. And every Sunday morning after we'd go to church, and before we left, my mother would put a roast in the oven so that we'd have our main meal on Sunday around 2 in the afternoon. So on the way home from church, Dad would stop at one of the Kringle bakeries and pick up a Kringle, and that would kind of tide us over until 2 in the afternoon. And that's what I grew up experiencing. So when I went off to college in the Twin Cities, after I got settled in for a while, I pulled aside some of my buddies and said, hey, where's the best Kringle in Minneapolis? And I'm thinking, Kringle? What's that? I just assumed everyone had Kringle, and everyone knew what Kringle was. Boy, I was mistaken, but always look forward to having a good Kringle. Next slide, please. So, for those that have either never been inside the Twin Towers or haven't been to New York to have had experienced them before, there were 2 very incredible buildings. Both of them took up each of them took up about a half a city block, so they were pretty massive. I mean, they came right up out of the ground and went over 100 stories into the air. I thought they looked eternal, like they'd be there forever. And who'd have thought that could change in an instant? I have a connection with the towers. I've actually eaten in the restaurant at the top of the North Tower. I've had clients that have worked in the towers and attended meetings occasionally in the towers. So to me, the towers seem like they would be there forever. Next slide, please. So 9/11 is one of those things that you remember where you were and what you were doing when it happened. There are a few events in our lifetimes where that's the case. I remember as a small child when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, where I was, what I was doing. And most of you probably remember that fateful day of 9/11, where you were and what you were doing. So it was quite a tragic event. Next slide, please. So when I was in New York, actually in New Jersey that day, wanted you to know exactly where I was. I was across the river from the Twin Towers, about maybe a little bit more than a half a mile away, in a building, an office building on the Jersey side, a glass tower, beautiful building, beautiful view of the towers across the river from that location. Next slide, please. So I was there, I had 3 clients at that time as a consultant that I was doing work with, and one of them was an international chemical company in the building that I mentioned earlier. I flew in the evening before with 3 of my other team members from the company that I owned and worked with. One of them had never been to New York before, and so it was a special treat for him. We were in a hotel not far from the office building we were staying in on the Jersey side. And looking out across the river, he was just amazed at the view. It was a clear evening, bright moon, and he was so taken by that he actually called his mother and said, my gosh, I have this great view of Manhattan, the Twin Towers, and in the moonlight. And of course, that was the last nighttime view before the towers were destroyed. Next slide, please. So on the morning of September 11th, we arrived at our client's location at about 8:50 in the morning, I guess, to set up for a presentation in their boardroom. We had done a brand evaluation. We're preparing a brand strategy for this chemical company. They had flown in executives from around the world in the different offices that they had around the world for this presentation. And while we were there setting up, shortly after we arrived, we noticed that the North Tower across the river was smoking. There was a large building, smoke coming from it. And somebody said that they had heard on the radio that maybe a small private airplane had accidentally flown into the tower. That was the report at the time. So as we were watching that tower smoke, and the smoke continued to grow and develop, I happened to notice a commercial airliner flying low and toward the south tower, coming from the other direction. And I thought to myself, my gosh, if that plane doesn't get some altitude, it's liable to hit something. And of course, moments later, the plane flew into the south tower with a huge explosion. And the people that were around me watching, so I'd say there was a lot of screaming, commotion, a lot of chaos. No one could believe what they had just seen. For whatever reason, I don't know why, we decided to start the meeting. So we went into the boardroom. All of the clients' executives that had come in were there. And after about 15 minutes into the presentation, there was a knock on the door, and the CEO's secretary came in. She handed him a note. He read it to himself first, and then he told the rest of the group that the Pentagon had just been struck. So there was some talk and discussion about what to do next. We decided that we wouldn't be able to really focus on what we were there to focus on. So the CEO decided to end the meeting temporarily, I guess at least. I went into his office with him, and we started to discuss next steps, what we were going to do. And as we were doing that, his office looked directly across from the Twin Towers. We were watching both towers at this time, smoking and burning pretty significantly. We were talking about different options. You know, his hotel, or his secretary could rebook our hotel rooms because we were planning to fly out that afternoon after the presentation back to Atlanta. And one of my team members is from DC. We had an office there. As we're discussing and talking about next steps, I mean, obviously it was a huge expense for them. They had flown all these executives in from different parts of the world. That's when the South Tower fell. I mean, to me it was surreal. It was as if I was in a dream. Couldn't imagine a tower that tall actually disappeared. So as we witnessed that, I made the decision. I said, well, I'm going to gather my team. We're going to get back on the road, and we're going to leave, and we'll figure out how we finish the rest of the presentation. Whether we do it, you know, electronically, by telephone, or whatever. Fortuitously, when we had flown in the night before, we were all coming from basically different locations. We got to the airport, the rental car counter, roughly at the same time. And everybody had, you know, booked a car, a rental car. I said, it's kind of crazy that we're all getting cars. Let's just get a minivan, and we can, you know, all pile into that. So we got into the minivan. We got on the road on the Jersey Turnpike to leave. And as we were leaving, or shortly after we left, it's a good thing we left when we did. They closed both the Jersey Turnpike and the New York Turnpike into Manhattan for obvious reasons. But as we were driving south into Delaware and south from there even, it was amazing going in the other direction. It was just solid emergency vehicle after emergency vehicle heading into New York to help however they could. And as we looked in the rearview mirror, I mean, obviously, you know, the second tower had fallen by then. It was just a big, massive cloud of smoke. And it almost looked like a mushroom cloud from a nuclear explosion. That's significant. And of course, no cell phone service at all. It was harrowing. We did listen to the radio, and we, you know, listened to what was going on. You can turn to the next slide, please. So it took us 13 and a half hours to drive back to Atlanta. But on the way, we dropped off, as I mentioned, a team member from DC, and there were military jets flying all around DC at the time. You could see the smoke coming from the Pentagon as well. And it took me about, I don't know, a couple weeks before I could watch it again on TV and relive that horror. What I had thought I had seen while I was in the CEO's office looking at both towers, it looked to me like there were pieces of the building that were falling off. But later realized those were actually people jumping from the building. Next slide. As you can probably imagine, there was a lot of chaos in the air. At the time, there were about 4,000 flights in the air, either near to or close to the U.S. that were immediately directed to land. And amazingly, you can actually Google this. It shows kind of a time-lapse video of, there's a dot for each airplane. And it shows over time how those dots all disappeared from the air. But it took about 2.5 hours for all of those planes to be grounded. A pretty exceptional feat if you think about that, 4,000 airplanes. And for about a week, as you probably remember, there weren't any real commercial flights flown to or from the United States until new security procedures were put in place. You probably remember the air marshals that were placed randomly on different aircraft. They reinforced the cockpit doors. So all of that took a little bit of time to put in place. And of course, America was really in shock over what had happened. It took a while for us all to recover. Next slide. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, 9/11 was really a wake-up call for me. I felt particularly vulnerable. At the time, I was probably traveling for my career about 4 or 5 days a week, living out of a suitcase. And what really struck home for me is 20 days earlier, I was on flight 175. The one that hit the South Tower. It was a Boston to LA flight. So, could have been me on that plane. So, at this point in my life, I wasn't the most regular churchgoer. You might say I drifted a little bit from the church and even my faith. However, following this event, I felt that God was calling me back. So it wasn't long after that I actually decided to sell my interest in my consulting business to my 2 other partners, take a needed break from all of this tragedy and to focus on what was really important in life. So 9/11 will always be a vivid memory for me, and every anniversary of 9/11 I take the time to reflect and pray. Next slide. So during 9/11, as part of that tragedy, I lost 2 client colleagues. Could have been worse. There was another client colleague that on that morning, who lived in New Jersey, woke up and saw what a beautiful day it was, sun shining, and she decided to take the ferry across the river instead of take the train and the subway into New York, where she normally would have exited in the subway station beneath the towers.
Oh.
So that saved her life. It was a couple weeks later that I traveled back to New York to work closely with another one of my clients, who was the American Bible Society. American Bible Society is an organization that actually prints most of the Bibles that we have today. If you look in the front of your Bible, it's probably published by the American Bible Society. They have a team of biblical scholars responsible for a lot of the different versions or newer versions of the Bible that have been printed. And we spent a lot of time figuring out how we could help New Yorkers cope with that tragedy. We actually hired some musicians. We wrote, recorded, and then we distributed a song based on Psalm 23. We handed those out to as many people as we could, along with New Testament Bibles, to help ease the pain and help with understanding that tragedy. My company also started a scholarship fund for the children of the parents who perished in 9/11. I'm kind of proud of that. And at the 1-year anniversary of 9/11, I went back to New York City, participated in a memorial service. For those of you that have been to New York, you know that New York is a really loud, noisy city. Taxi horns blaring and beeping all the time. But during that moment, during that memorial service, there was a moment of silence, and I swear, you could have heard a pin drop. New York was completely quiet. And then about 2 years after that, I was flying, I forget where I was flying to, but I was sitting next to a woman, and I noticed that she was pretty nervous as we were preparing to take off, so I started a conversation with her to try to take her focus and attention off of the trip. And she relayed a story to me that was pretty amazing. She had said that a couple weeks prior to 9/11, she was on a flight, and shortly after takeoff, there were 2 or 3, she described them as Arab-looking men who got up out of their seats when the seatbelt sign was still lit up, and the flight attendants, of course, came over and were telling them they had to sit down, and they created a bit of a ruckus. And she said that she recognized those 3 individuals as part of the 3 who attacked the towers.
Oh.
She reported that to the FBI, and they confirmed that, in fact, it was probably a practice drill to see how the flight attendants would react to them being out of their seats when they were supposed to be. I've been back to New York a few times since then, to the World Trade Center Memorial. It's a very solemn experience. I don't know if anybody else has been to the memorial. You'll know what I mean. If you haven't been and you decide to go to New York at any point, certainly it's worth a visit. I would also encourage you to find the firehouse. It's about 3 blocks away that was closest to the tragedy, to the towers. That's the firehouse that lost the most firefighters, first responders that day. And it's turned into quite a memorial. I mean, it's worth seeing if you get there. Next slide. So I also wanted to share some interesting and important, what I think are important facts about 9/11. That tragedy was the biggest disaster in our country's history. There were more lives lost than, and not to downplay the tragedy of Pearl Harbor, but more lives lost in 9/11 than at Pearl Harbor. The 9/11 attacks killed almost 3,000 people. 400 were emergency responders. And the number of people injured was over 6,000, so quite a tragedy. So I referred to the people that were responsible for attacking the towers. There were 19 of them. who were part of a radical group, Al Qaeda, that was led and funded by Osama bin Laden. So you can understand why he was such an important target for us to take out. It's estimated that the attack caused a minimum of $10 billion in infrastructure and property damage. Cost of the cleanup was $750 million. There was 1.8 million tons of debris that took 3.1 million man-hours before it was finally finished on May 30th the following year. Ages of the victims ranged from 2 years old to 85 years old, and about 75 to 80% of the victims were actually men. After the first attack, when the first tower was struck, it took only 102 minutes, about 90 minutes, an hour and a half, for both towers to collapse. Only 12 survivors were pulled from the rubble. The last survivor about 24 hours after the collapse. It took firefighters 100 days to extinguish all the fires that were around Ground Zero. Next slide. In case you're wondering what happened to all of that debris, that 1.8 million tons of debris, it took over 9 months to clear all of it. Most of the debris was sent to a landfill on Staten Island by barge to be sifted through and sorted. Most of the steel was recycled and used to produce other products, including the construction of the USS New York. 37,000 tons of steel, wood, and concrete was used for the 9/11 Memorial at Ground Zero, and other memorials across the country. Arizona has 2 main 9/11 memorials. The largest is Wesley Bowen Memorial Plaza in Phoenix. There's also a fairly substantial one in Winslow. Has anyone been to either of those memorials? There are other smaller memorials located in Gilbert, Anthem, Bullhead City, Sedona, and Chino Valley. Unfortunately, we don't have one here in Tucson. I would love to see one. Hopefully in the future, city leadership or whomever might consider creating one. Next slide. So I will never forget 9/11, and hopefully you won't either. Next slide. So that's my 9/11 story. I appreciate you guys listening. Believe it or not, therapeutic for me to share it.
Good.
Does anyone have a 9/11 story that they want to share with the rest of the group this morning? Or any questions you have for me about what I experienced and how I coped with it? Yes, sir.
I have one. There was a young man from
Yeah.
and he went to culinary school, and he had been hired to be a cook in the restaurant up there. And the day of this happened was supposed to be his first day of work, but the day before, the head chef called and said something about don't come the next day because whatever reason was, but he was that close to having been in that place that day. And again, he wonders why.
A lot of amazing stories similar to that. I mean, as we were doing work with American Bible Society in New York, we heard story after story and so many different personal connections that people had, either those that were lost in the towers collapse or first responders, families that responded to the tragedy as well. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Daryl. I'm relatively new here. I've been here at Resurrection since last November.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Welcome.
So my close encounter story is that prior to moving here, I was working in San Diego on a Department of Defense contract with the Navy, and the week prior to 9/11, literally to the day, I was in the wing of the Pentagon getting ready for a program meeting, and it was the wing where the plane flew into literally a week later. The admiral that was the program manager and I were meeting to plan what was going to be, and it started out to be the following week back in San Diego, a whole big review of what the script was going to be, what the deadlines were going to be, how we were going to execute the plan. And so that went well. Got back that morning in San Diego. I was driving to that meeting and listening to the radio broadcasts of what was happening. Because of course we're 3 hours later and most of all of this had been going on early in the morning San Diego time. So we got there, we all met. We couldn't really get our heads around, like you experienced, having a program meeting when all this was going on. And so we started to try to figure out the logistics of getting everybody back home. It was the same kind of scenario. And similarly, many of the folks that had flown in from the East Coast, we got them vans as best we could and rented them, and they took the long trek back home. But yeah, it was quite harrowing. That's a good word you used.
Thanks for sharing that. Appreciate it. I know a lot of people were stranded across all parts of the country when those 4,000 planes were grounded. Some of them ended up in Canada and other places, and it did take quite a long time for a lot of people to get back home or to where they were headed. Another quick story that I'll share with you was several weeks after 9/11, and I was flying again up to a client in New York with two other colleagues this time. We're all from Atlanta, and flying up to New York. And I had flown so much with Delta that I was kind of on the automatic upgrade list. So every time I flew up, there was an empty seat in first class. They moved me up to first class. So that's what happened that morning. Again, several weeks after 9/11. And I had my business suit, jacket, suit and tie on, and sitting up in first class. And as we were approaching New York, I noticed we made a big sweeping turn. I was sitting in the window seat. And shortly after that, the pilot came on the intercom and he said, "You may have noticed that we made a big turn before getting to New York." He said, "All I know is," he said, "we've been contacted by Delta Operations in Atlanta to return to Atlanta." So I thought, well, that's kind of strange. So back in those days, they had up in first class a little phone between the seats up in first class. And you swipe your card and make a call. So I'd never really used them before or had any luck using them. And so I figured, well, I'll try and call my office and talk to my secretary and see if she knows what's going on. So surprisingly, the call went through and she answered the phone. She said, "Where are you?" And I said, "Oh, we're coming back to Atlanta." I said, "Do you know what's going on?" She said, "Yeah, we've got the news of it." She said, "Apparently there was a plane at one of the New York airports, either on takeoff or landing, an engine fell off. Plane didn't crash or anything like that, no one was hurt, but they didn't know at the time whether it was terrorist related or otherwise, so as a precaution, they closed all three New York airports." So I thought that was pretty interesting information. I kind of got the attention of one of the flight attendants, told her what I had just heard from my secretary, and she said, "Thank you, I'll inform the cockpit just in case they didn't have those details." So I said, "Do you mind?" I said, "If I get up and go back into coach and tell the two colleagues that I'm traveling with why we're going back to Atlanta?" She goes, "No, that's fine." So walking out of first class, I didn't know where they were sitting. So I'm kind of scanning all the rows of where people are to find them. And I could hear people saying, "He's one of those air marshals." He's called me a terrorist on board. I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I start? But yeah, that was kind of a scary incident as well. Ron.
Thank you, that was great. And I'm sure we all remember where we were. My wife flew on a plane a couple of weeks before 9/11 to go to a funeral from Salt Lake to Detroit. and recognized that there was a young guy, Arab-looking guy, good-looking, well-groomed, wearing a dress shirt and blue jeans. And what blew her away was that his blue jeans looked like they had just come out of a package, and nobody's blue jeans looked like that. And he was sitting in first class, and so when the flight had taken off, she saw that he got up and he was just marching up and down the aisle. And she thought it was really weird, like, what's going on? He's going to do something. Something's going to happen here. And this was before September 11th. And then she thought, I think maybe I'm just being a little bit of a racist or something. But then when we were in the grocery store after September 11th, Life magazine had a cover with all of the 19 terrorists photos on there. And she recognized the guy from there and called the FBI, and they said, yeah, we knew this. But they were getting calls from all over the country about it.
Thanks, Ron. Anyone else, any 9/11 stories or any questions for me about either 9/11 or what I did before 9/11 or after? Yes, sir.
I don't need the mic. I'm David George, Pastor Carol's husband. And my wife drugged me to the East Coast in 2018 to look at leaves. Okay? You could drive around in 9 different states for 2 weeks looking at leaves. That's what a man. We went to the Memorial Park. And I'm a veteran, Navy, 60 to 66, and very patriotic. And I thought, this is stupid. They just dug a hole out in the middle of the field, and that's the Memorial Park. But when I got there, all the names of everyone that perished that day are engraved in that memorial all the way around the outside. And I just sat down and cried. It is so emotional. If you haven't been there and you get a chance to go. It's worth the experience. One of the things I remember most about that is they planted these trees. And if you stand back and you look at the trees, it just looks like a forest. But if you move over here and look down, they're all lined up. They're moving lines, both directions.
It's really
And it just, little things like that they did as a celebration for all those people that passed. It's just incredible. So I get very emotional just talking about it. But Alan, thank you very much. It was a great presentation.
Thank you. Thanks, David. Anyone else? Comments, questions? Yes.
Just a short. We spent a number of years in Yuma, Arizona, and among the families that we became very close to, when their daughter was to be married, she was marrying a United Airlines pilot. And the best man at their wedding piloted the Pennsylvania plane on 9/11. How remote, but how close.
And I know I failed to mention the fourth plane, but you all know the fate of that one.
Yeah.
As we were listening to the radio for the drive from Jersey to Atlanta, there was concern about a missing plane that was still in the air. That's the one that went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, thanks to passengers on board. Otherwise, they believe it may have been targeting either the White House or the U.S. Capitol. Yes, sir.
I just always had a real lot of thoughts for those people. There were people of action, but I've been able to give that kind of action.
I'll try. There it is. There. Anyway, I just admired those guys who went ahead and took that plane that was, some people say it was designated for the White House or hit the Pentagon or whatever it was. But they saw something going on and they did the right thing and they took charge in that plane and it didn't go to its destination. Now that's awful gutsy and also a very, very strong thoughts that went the right way.
Great, thank you. Mark?
Just a little
one of the unsung heroes. I served on a committee for ELCA for federal chaplains and military chaplains. And Pastor Eric Wester was assigned to the Pentagon. He was also a colonel in the Army. And Eric was one of the first people to run into the Pentagon. And he said he was drawn to it. He wasn't supposed to be on duty that day. So it's just a miracle and miraculous how God works. So Lutheran's on ground zero at the Pentagon, helping others that needed the help. So.
Anything else?
Okay, thank you, Alan. We've got the routine. We've got a certificate. Mark has it.
Hey, Jim, is he going to talk about his time with President Reagan? Part of his presentation?
Yeah. You want to say something about working with President Reagan?
Well, that was a treat of a lifetime, no doubt. I worked and was detailed to the White House for about a year and briefed the president somewhat regularly. I mean, we had a team, so I rotated. The first briefing that he received every morning, it was basically a recap from intelligence sources of everything that happened in the past 24 hours of significance, either affected U.S. national security or U.S. foreign policy. But a delightful man to work for, extremely respectful, humorous at times, as you can imagine. Yeah, it was an assignment that I'd never would have not have experienced. So there are little stories that I can share, but I won't take up any more time. If you're interested, you can come in and talk afterwards. Yeah.
Okay, we have a certificate for you and another one of our coins. Thank you, Alan. Very well done. Yeah. Good. Before we go, we need to do the Lord's Prayer. So I'll lead. Will you please rise? In a humble situation. Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and power, and glory, forever and ever. Amen.
okay, we'll see you next month. It's November 1st. Colonel Tim Terrace will be our speaker. Don't know what the menu is yet.
Alan, good presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, it must have been a terrible thing to watch from across the river and nothing you can do.
Nothing you can do. I mean, it was like it was
Surreal. It's like a movie.